Housing, Community Development, Investment, and Development Committee, HCID. We are waiting for members. We will convene when the members come. I want to give note to everybody who's here today that we're going to operate this under Rule 7. This committee will be conducting the meeting today in conformance with Rule 7, specifically a member of the public wishing to speak on more than one agenda item at a single meeting shall limit his or her remarks on agenda items to a total of 5 minutes per meeting. 4, we will recess, and then we will return to item 5. We will go into closed session, and then we will reopen the meeting again. Take public comment.
Sure.
You ready?
Hey, do you have a memory stick? I know. Can you bring it up? Okay, wait for Adam to get there.
This. Good afternoon. I am Gil Cedillo. This is the Housing Committee. Colleagues, Mr. Fuentes, Mr. Harris Dawson. Is Mr. Price joining us? Oh, and Senator Price. Consent items. So we take public comment before we vote, or so we've got public comment. Items 1 and 2. Aldo Bartolini.
Mr. Chair, I should just read the item briefly. Item 1 is a Housing Community Investment Department report relative to issuance of $17.8 million in funded revenue bonds for the Pilgrim Tower Apartments. Item 2 is a similar item providing $950,000 in revenue bonds for 960 West 62nd Place.
Item 1, Mr. Aldo Bartolini.
The Park Plaza and Pilgrim Tower apartment projects should not be approved until the public is able desperately need city subsidies. More detailed cost and financial information needs to be provided. I contacted the Housing and Community Investment Department and asked for cost and financial information. I provided the department with detailed questions via email. I was then instructed to fill out a California Public Record Act request. I submitted the request and was then told that they could not open the PDF files. I resubmitted the request in a different format and was then asked to use a fax. And I have not used a fax in 8 years. Because of the city's inability to receive this information using current technology, I will submit my request in person. I look forward to reading the cost and financial information. Thank you. Items 1 and 2.
Thank you very much. I am for safe, clean, healthy, well-maintained, and well-managed feng shui type of ambiance, an affordable type of apartments, but only with the condition that it is not rented to any illegal, jealous, uncivilized, racist, hate-mongering wetbacks and/or evil Chango Latino gangbangers. But once these Latino wetbacks and Chango gangbangers move in, the neighborhoods then, there goes the neighborhoods with horrendous filth, trash, with all types of illegal dumpings, drug, weapons, vandalism. Yeah.
Ramirez, are you going to address the item?
Oh, I am addressing the item. I'm giving more of a full disclosure of what happens when you rent out these apartments to illegals.
The item is about the bond issuance for the funding of these apartments.
And the funding, right.
About that?
Yes, I do. And the funding should only be given if it is rented out to military veterans and law-abiding citizens, not to illegal wetbacks or gangbangers. That's my point. Funding should only be dispersed legally to the city of Los Angeles if it is rightfully and lawfully used for housing military veterans who are homeless on the streets right now. Is that my point clear? Yeah. So again, having said that, to me and to most of us Angelinos, this is vitally important. I am not military, city attorney. I am homeless, but not by my own design. I am homeless again because I spoke out and exposed this corruption of the city and stepped on political toes. But I come here because I love and respect the United States military and I love America. God bless America. So I'm not doing it for me. I'm doing it for the military veterans. God bless their souls because they got a whirlpool of humanity. I bow down to these men and women who do just that. They need housing and we are subsidizing these illegals. God, you should be fired. So having said that, again, not for me, not for me. But God bless America and Donald Trump.
Next speaker is Herman.
One and two.
Items 1 and 2.
Is that only 1 minute for each item, sir? Okay, just 1 minute? But such a lot of time. A lot of time to talk about the illegal action of the city of Los Angeles for the $17 million of wasted money for development brought by you by the CRLA, which Jerry Brown crushed due to the voters. But the action of the city is to corrupt and abuse tax-exempt multifamily housings, to illegally misuse bonds by this administrative use by Mr. Felipe Fuentes, who should have some idea what to do about the bonds, but he don't give a shit. That's why there's so many homeless kids in the street, like myself, and even the lady speaker. Families are in the street, and nobody cares. They're just fucking homeless people. Just throw them under the bus. And you said item number 2 now? Yeah, item 2. Oh, look, $950,000 for additional improvements for the Park Plaza Apartments located at 960 West 62nd Place in CD9, current price. Now, Mr. Price, why can't you be like Cedillo? Be fair. We need sustainable housing for the disabled. That's brought out in one of your specials here. Later on when I speak about it, you have to do something about sustainable housing. the voucher is not enough for us to live. But you do make special treatments for other, what do they call those people that you guys take money from? Pay to pay people? But I'm not one of them. All I'm trying to do is protect the rights of citizens in Los Angeles from being swindled by people like Felipe Fuentes from Sacramento, who take harsh criticism from the public because they know. You should know better, Felipe. Yeah, you should know. Chipmunks are not invited in the city to eat up our streets.
Mr. Herman, your comments need to be germane to the
time,
item.
man. That's my time.
Fernando Portillo.
Yes.
Item number 2, sir.
Issuance of the $950,000 in bonds should not be approved until the public can review the proposed financing for the project in more detail than shown in the City Council report. In order to determine whether this project is truly in need of the city's affordable housing dollars, more detailed financial information is required. If more detailed financial information were made available, it could be determined, for example, why the financing sources schedule in the council's report does not include the income generated from the property during the construction phase. In most projects, such as Park Plaza, this income is considered a source of financing to the project. This income could easily amount to as much as $200,000. Also, the financing sources schedule only shows a deferred developer fee of $13,000 out of a total developer fee of $1,670,000. In this case, I do not see why the developer could not defer at least $400,000 of their fee. Just by investigating these two concerns alone, additional funds of $600,000 could potentially be identified. These funds could be used to reduce the city's existing $5 million loan to the project. These resulting savings could instead be used to produce more affordable housing for the needy and homeless instead of fattening the profits of the developers that the city deals with. Thank you.
Mr. Garbellini. Item number 2.
Essentially a repeat of what I read earlier, that the Pilgrim Tower apartment project should not be approved until the public is able to review the costs and financing of the two projects. The City Council reports only provide general costs and financial information. In order for the public to determine whether these projects really need city subsidies, more detailed costs and financial information needs to be provided. I contacted the Housing and Community Investment Department and asked for cost and financial information, and I provided a series of questions in detail. I was later asked to fill out a California Public Record Act request. I submitted that, and then I was told that they could not open the PDFs. Ultimately, I was asked to send the fax. I will be submitting these in person. I'm unhappy that I was not able to get the information, and I look forward to reading the cost and financial information for the Pilgrim Tower apartments. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion. These items are on consent.
So moved. Second. Committee members, item 2 has a CO report that was submitted to you. Do you wish to approve that report as part of your action?
We do.
Thank you.
Mr. Fuentes? Second.
That takes us to item number 3, which is continued from this February 11th, 2015. It's a housing report relative to the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Program.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Claudia Monterrosa, and I'm the Director for the Public Policy and Research Unit at HCLA. And I'm here to provide a verbal report back on the Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Grant Program. Just as to reiterate, the goals of this program, which is under the Cap and Trade Proceeds statewide program, is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled, increase accessibility of housing, job centers, and key destinations, and expand low carbon and transportation. The key investment guidelines for this program is that 50% of the funding is to go to affordable housing, 50% to the disadvantaged communities, 40% of the total funding to go to TOD project or transit-oriented development projects, and 30% to interconnectivity projects. The one thing that was in place for the first NOFA was a $15 million jurisdictional cap. And one of the things that may occur in this second or upcoming NOFA will be the removal of that cap and also potentially considering regional allocations. I'd like to turn it over to the CLA before I can go over the results of the NOFA.
Dora Huerta with the Office of the CLA. Just want to speak to a little bit about the city's role in the first round of cap and trade funding. Earlier this year, our offices made a presentation on the program, and this body directed our offices to form a working group, a city working group, to prioritize projects. Pursuant to this committee's request, in February, our office convened that group, and as part of that group, we included our Department of Housing, Transportation, the Office of the Mayor's Riverworks team, and the Housing Authority of the City of LA. And during a very compressed timeline, our group worked to create criteria that would help us determine which projects would rise to a level of support on behalf of the city. A couple of those items that we considered were one, whether the project met the concept proposal requirements; two, whether it was recommended in the Housing Department's managed pipeline process; three, whether the project was in a disadvantaged community as defined by the program regulations; and fourth, whether the project met a policy objective, a plan, or a city departmental priority. The working group then formulated a list of programs to support, and the city took a position in the form of a resolution and a letter from the mayor that was sent to the Strategic Growth Council listing our prioritized projects. Claudia will now speak to the results of that first funding round. We just want to reiterate on our behalf of our office that our office is committed to reconvening that working group for the second round and setting the next set of regulations to ensure that the city will be competitive in the next round.
All right, so there were a total of 9 applications from the City of Los Angeles that were invited to submit a full proposal in April of 2015. This also includes the Roland Curtis project that was invited to apply only a couple of weeks before the actual application deadline. The 9 invited projects represent a total of $40 million in total fund request. All 9 projects were located in disadvantaged communities as defined by the Cal Enviro Screen 2.0 by the Air Resource Board, and all 9 projects were 100% affordable housing projects. Of the total 9 applicants, 6 were awarded ASIC funding on June 30th. The total ASIC grant funding was $15 million out of the $120 million available statewide. Actually, the Strategic Growth Council allocated an additional $2 million that makes the total 122. There were 3 projects that were subject to the jurisdictional cap that total $17 million. So those did not get funding in this first NOFA round. And the $50 million represents only 12% of the total available funds statewide. By contrast, the City of Los Angeles has 26% of the disadvantaged communities, so we were less than half in terms of representation for the disadvantaged communities. And so if the $50 million jurisdictional cap would not be in place, we would have received closer to $32 million potentially for the City of Los Angeles. It is important to note that overall the Southern California region fared very poorly as compared to the Bay Area. The Bay Area, and I passed out a fact sheet from the Strategic Growth Council, the Bay Area received 39% of the total funds, or $47 million in total for the region. The Southern California region, which is made up of SCAG, only received 23%. Over 55% of that 23% are projects in the City of Los Angeles. So the City of LA was very competitive and would have been more competitive if we had not been subject to the $50 million jurisdictional cap. Due to these issues, during the month of June and July, HCID and HACLA worked together along with the mayor's office to basically advocate for the awarding the ASIC program funds to those three projects. And we're still waiting to see what the outcome is going to be for that, and we're hopeful that for the second round that those projects will not have to resubmit. So there was a motion that was introduced by the Strategic Growth Council on June 30th to consider that issue. That will not be considered until later in the fall. So in July, there was a lessons learned workshop given by the Strategic Growth Council, and they outlined specific issues that they're going to be looking at to revise for the second round of funding. And those include housing and transportation intersections. How can we improve the collaboration between transit and affordable housing projects so that there is more of a connection to really increase mobility and reduce vehicle usage? Issues with the application process, providing more technical assistance, really reviewing the GHG quantification methodology, and most importantly, a geographic distribution. That is something that statewide is being advocated to see how those funds will be distributed. The timeline that the Strategic Growth Council has outlined is in August, the SGC will be revising the guidelines. In the fall or sometime in September or October, they will be releasing a revised set of guidelines. And they will release the brand new NOFA sometime in early January and sometime in early 2015 during the winter months. So I also want to outline some of our initial recommendations based on the lessons learned. So number one, remove the current $15 million jurisdictional cap. Increase scoring points available for affordable housing of extremely low income and very low income households to further drive commitment to disadvantaged communities and to reduce GHG emissions. Guidelines should require at the very least to award additional scoring points for the support and approval of local governments in order to ensure that ASIC funded projects meet local priorities. Refine the Cal-EE model to reflect a more detailed evaluation of the correlation between affordable housing and the reduction of GHG emissions, and allocate extra points to protect and preserve existing at-risk affordable housing projects. Now, what does the funding look like for this coming year? By the governor's May revised budget, there was a detailed cap and trade proceeds budget outline in there. That was not approved in the final one, but the initial allocation for the ASIC program is $400 million. That's 3 to 4 times the amount that we had for 2014-2015. That $400 million represents 20% of the over $2.2 billion available right now under the cap and trade proceeds. So what is critical right now is to ensure that that money actually gets approved and appropriated during the month of August. All of the cap and trade proceed funding, both the regulated appropriations and the non-appropriated programs are going to be taken up by the legislature and by the governor during this month. So part of our work is to ensure that the $400 million is actually approved and budgeted for this year. Immediate next steps, given the first NOFA round results, is that the city begin to coordinate with other departments, and as Dora outlined, through the coordination of the working group, to compile comments that reflect all of the department's needs and also to advantage the city for better results next year. In addition, begin the coordination of the city family to strategically align potential projects for the second round of funding. HCID is currently reviewing the second call for projects under the managed pipeline, and we have received 27 of those projects. Those are currently under review for threshold and underwriting guidelines. Of the 27 projects, 22 are located within a half-a-mile buffer of rail, BRT, and RBT corridors. This is the current managed pipeline TOD definition. And 23 of these 27 projects are located in disadvantaged communities. So basically, the managed pipeline projects are well poised to apply for this ASIC program in the future. We have also, per council instruction, continued to work with Metro on an MOU, so we're in discussions with them. And some of the things that we want to consider is the first mile, last mile provisions and programs and policies that they have and how we can align those with the affordable housing projects. One of the things that we might to also consider is to create a separate call for projects for the ASIC program in particular, to make sure that other projects that may not be in the managed pipeline or that are non-affordable housing projects can actually come to the city and be coordinated through this process. Some of them may actually be involving that could be part of the MOU with Metro, so that we do a joint call for projects for this program. Also, most recently, one of the things that came out is that we definitely need technical assistance to help us coordinate and better poise the projects in the city itself for this type of funding. And so HSID has reached out to the enterprise community partners to explore potential technical assistance for the city. Enterprise community partners provided extensive technical assistance in the Bay Area, and they were very successful in the model that they presented. So those are some of the steps that we're taking, and if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer those. Thank you.
So, thank you for the update. I think this is very helpful. I want to sort of talk about two things. So the jurisdictional cap of the $15 million is clearly a problem, and in the fall you say that they are going to be revisiting the regulations. What are we doing to make sure that they amend them so that it's not a jurisdictional cap, but more weighted by population and need? I mean, I think we understand, that we would have gotten a lot more had the SGC really looked at what the need is versus this jurisdictional cap. And I have to imagine that's what puts more weight on Northern California, because I think they've got more jurisdictions. So what are we doing to make sure that we get the cap lifted or changed? And are we also proposing for them to have a sort of statewide perspective on how it is that there's more equity up and down the state?
Yes, we've made our points very clear to both the new executive director for the SGC, some of the council members, and the SGC staff. We've stated a number of times that the $50 million is not an equitable way to distribute that funding. One of the things that they did outline at the stakeholder meeting in July was that was potentially a mistake for the Strategic Growth Council, and that nobody really is happy with that provision. So that's most certainly going to go away. Now, the real fight is going to be on the geographic distribution. The rural communities have a very strong voice statewide, and because of the guidelines and how the program is designed, it advantages localities that have high quality transit as opposed to the rural areas. So I believe, and also based on the information that we received, that there might be a set aside for rural jurisdictions out of the $400 million. So now that may leave a percentage or an amount that will be then distributed in some sort of way, either through Northern California, Central Valley, and Southern California. One of the things that we have outlined is that we have the most disadvantaged communities in the whole state. We represent 26% out of the whole state, and we make up 60% in the county of LA alone. Population, Southern California has over 55% of the population in the entire state. So that's another a factor for them to consider. And so right now, there isn't any formed idea as to how they're going to distribute the funding, if it's going to be by these factors or they're just going to, come up with some percentages. But we are advocating for something that reflects a very equitable distribution of that funding. And so they've heard it, but they have to address it statewide. And if you see the map that's on the back of that sheet, you can see that regardless of their $15 million cap, the projects are pretty concentrated in certain areas. I think that for Southern California, in particular SCAG, it didn't fare well. I think it needs more technical assistance in that area because we actually have a lot of jurisdictions. We have 5 counties. The Bay Area was more poised, more ready in more jurisdictions than Southern California. I think that's one of the lessons learned, and so we need to do everything that we can do collectively to help advance those projects. But the City of LA itself, I mean, if it wasn't for the City of LA, we would not have captured even that number of projects or funding.
Yeah, it's my suspicion that if we got rid of the cap, that might actually naturally sort of, if it was a pro rata based sort of distribution, then it might actually tilt the tables in the favor of Southern California. But I mean, I just wonder out loud how it is that we're going to, I know that the department is doing a fantastic job in communicating to the Strategic Growth Council, but I also am a member of SCAG, and they are very frustrated. We've taken resolutions and this sort of thing. What type of lobbying efforts are we actually going to employ to actually make sure that we're pestering the SGC so that they can actually adopt the regulations? I know that the first round was live and learn moment, but it'd be a real shame.
We have time now to do it.
So I mean, so help us understand how it is that we can be effective. Does the council have to take an action? The mayor, because of the charter reform 10 years ago, is the one that actually communicates our legislative deals. But I mean, we should really get our lobbyists in Sacramento to help us here, because they're going to keep eating our lunch. One idea that I've got that I just want to sort of, and I'm going to get in trouble for Susan for not talking about this beforehand. So I just wonder, you know, so the Strategic Growth Council, GHG reduction, it's got to be around already established transit corridors?
Yes, or future within 5 years.
Okay, so Measure R2, for example, right, is going to be on the
Crenshaw.
I'm thinking Pacoima.
Pacoima, Van Nuys, if you make a
because the pipeline, as we talked about before, CD7 is disproportionately out of the managed pipeline sort of conversation. And I understand, and I've said it before, the managed pipeline is tremendous public policy for the city of Los Angeles. It's brilliant. The tax credit authority that we've got, I think it's a really good policy, but we've got to figure out how to fix it for the one council district that loses out in the conversation. But Measure R, the first one, actually has money dedicated to the north-south transit corridor right now. It's not enough for bus rapid transit or light rail transit, but that should be recognized as an investment in the corridor, because my thing is, it's a chicken and an egg thing here. We want TOD, we want the GHG reductions, but if we're going to wait until Measure R passes and we get fully funded, we're going to lose a lot of opportunity to actually incentivize the passage of something like Measure R2. So I'm wondering if we couldn't qualify today under the investment that was made under Measure R and future investments that we intend to make.
Your Van Nuys corridor, if it has, I believe it meets the definition of high-quality transit, but we can take a look at that a little bit more closely. If it has a service of 15-minute headways, then it will qualify under high-quality transit for TOD projects. If that's not the case, you can look at the other project type, which is the interconnectivity projects to increase mobility. So there are two different approaches to get this funding or to apply for this.
Let me zoom out and now be the voice of the San Fernando Valley on this committee, because I'm the only member, I believe, that represents the San Fernando Valley. Who's missing today? Weezar, he's from Los Angeles. So if you zoom out a little bit further, too, every single project that we invited, also, none of them are representative of the San Fernando Valley.
One.
But it's got a zero allocation in CD4.
Actually, you got Silmar Courts. It got $2.5 million.
All right, then I'm mistaken. I apologize.
Sorry.
So zooming out, only one was invited of the 13?
Out of 9, yeah.
Out of the 9. So, but it still sort of begs a question: what's inside the managed pipeline? And I know that you mentioned that you're looking towards the next round of invitees and this sort of thing. How do we make sure that the 40% of Los Angeles, and I understand when you add the affordability screen and the need, there's probably less with respect to the rest of Los Angeles, but there's still some qualified areas in the San Fernando Valley that should fit into that pipeline. How do we make sure that we are in, I want to look into the inlet and sort of see that there's something coming this way that eventually will make its way to the pipeline?
So one of the things that we've been talking internally is to potentially do a call for projects for ASIC funding specifically, in coordination with other projects, so that we can see the breadth of all of the projects or applicants for this funding source, regardless whether they are in the managed pipeline or not, so that we can have a coordinated effort. Because one of the things that we want to be able to advocate for is to provide those additional funds, additional points in the application criteria, so that it has heft, right? So that a city resolution supported action for that project means something in terms of points, and not just 1 point, but a higher number of points for that particular instance. So that's one of the things that we are addressing. In terms of work in Sacramento, the mayor's office, external affairs office has been doing quite a bit of work in that arena. And so I think for the city council will be to start working on comments as soon as possible and communicate those to the Strategic Growth Council. The mayor's office did provide already a revised guidelines comment letter that I outlined some of the preliminary recommendations that I described, but I do know that there are additional comments that the city would like to make, and right now we have sufficient time to collect all that information, work together so that when the revised guidelines come out sometime in September, we already at least have an idea of what is it that we want to advocate for, and then engage in communication with the Strategic Growth Council prior to the completion of that process. I imagine that as soon as the guidelines are issued, there might be a period between 2 to 4 weeks to respond, so it's going to have to be very quickly done if we want something that has the full council support.
Right.
So,
well, last time we didn't do it quick enough.
Right.
We were late to the party, so
yes.
we've got to move very quickly.
So right now we have enough time. We're in August. We need to, we have a pretty good idea of the things that we want to have changed in those guidelines, but there might be additional comments from other entities, from the river folks, from the transportation department, or from the planning department. So as quickly as we can get together to identify those and then put that together, then we can present it to the council, have a discussion, get it approved, and be ready.
Great, very good. Well, again, this is very exciting, smart policy that the state is employing, and your stewardship's been tremendous. I mean, housing's doing a great job for us, being an advocate. We just have to get Sacramento to get our fair share to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Senator?
Thank you. I think you've got some couple members.
A couple more, yeah, not so fast. First of all, I just want to thank you for the report, and thank the department for the efforts. I think this is an exciting roadmap that we have before us now, and I'm especially pleased about these projects that happen to be in the ninth. But more importantly, it will help us sort of move forward, disposing of these affordable housing projects in ways that we all want to see. You referenced $400 million in cap and trade dollars. That's statewide.
That's going to be statewide, potentially for this fiscal year.
I'm sorry.
It's the initial budgeting.
It's in the budget. We think it might be more, or
it hasn't been approved yet. That's subject to approval this month, before the legislative session ends. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. So how much of that do we hope to get, do you think?
You mean for the city of LA?
Yeah.
Well, we've been playing around with some amounts, at least proportional to what we get for the TCAC, which is, hovers over 20%, I believe, or actually 17%. Another idea is to be proportional to the 26% to disadvantaged community census tracts that we have, and that's the one that we will want to push forward so that we can have a just and equitable distribution of those funds, because the primary goal of this funding is to reduce GHG emissions, and 50% of the funding needs to be expended in disadvantaged communities, and that's where the most need is because of the combination of what makes up a disadvantaged community, which is a number of factors, including environmental pollutants, poverty, and a wholesale of other factors that indicate that there is a need there to address. So to create opportunities for job and transportation and housing.
Well, we agree, we support you on that, so any letters or any protests or whatever, let us know. So
Right. The other thing is there are a lot of statewide organizations working on this very purposely, like the California Housing Partnership, the Enviros, Housing Advocates. It's a very collaborative process, and most of those agencies concur with some of the ideas that we have and recommendations from the city.
And then talk about the role of the consultant, because I think we're going to have a consultant that's going to do what exactly?
It's for technical assistance to help us identify processes to enable the city to assist applicants. For instance, if the city wanted to be a co-applicant or a lead applicant, to help outline the various requirements that are going to have to be meeting. So
This is a
technical assistance.
for the department or for
It could be for both,
developers or
for the department to help guide the process, or for the city to help guide the process, and also for individual applicants in terms of the methodology to decrease GHG emissions. There is a vast need for technical assistance, and that's one of the areas that the Strategic Growth Council identified as being sorely needed. And that's where also SCAG comes in, and I believe that they're going to be bolstering their technical assistance efforts for that particular piece of work in terms of the GHG methodology.
Thank you.
Okay.
Speaker's card, public comment? Yay. Okay, public comment. Herman? Item 3.
Oh, Housing Community Investment Department. Project funding prioritized for 975 housing units solely for the cost of $61 million. Mister, can you please be quiet? I'm trying to finish my 1 minute of this bullshit. And Sustainable Community Program. Joe Blow Busquiano voted for this, but there was no community impact statement by Joe Blow Busquiano on top of the no financial analyst report. So how in the hell can you determine how to spend $61 million
You're not on the,
regarding the community impact reports of affordable housing? I'm on item 3, sir. Sustainable communities. So there is no sustainable communities without sustainable housing that is adequate for the services that the government, the federal government under HUD, should have rendered on our behalf. Thank you, Silvio.
where are we? So we're going into session.
Item 4? Did we approve item 4? No, we didn't.
Mr. Chair, would the committee be taking action on item 3?
Do we have receive and file, or what do we do? Request that HCID to work with CLA to craft comments on upcoming draft regulations, specifically with recommendations to support and/or amend to increase city's availability of resources to fund TODs and integrated connectivity projects, and to coordinate response to upcoming NOFA regulations.
That would be great. It's second. So moved. Second.
I just wanted to take
It's a verbal.
Mr. Chair, would you like to move to item 4?
Yes, we'd like to move our
Item 4 is a HCID report relative to authorizing various actions regarding the disposition and development of 27 housing assets.
Good afternoon. Brett Avershos, Office of the CAO. The request before you is a request from HCID for approval of various actions related to the disposition and development of 27 HCID-owned housing assets. These actions include making 22 of the assets available for the development of affordable housing, entering into an MOU with EWDD to make 3 of the assets available for economic development opportunities, and the remaining 2 assets listed available for sale. The HID also requests authority to enter into technical service contracts for the planning, entitlement, financing, and development of the 27 assets. The proposed contracts will be paid for by the Low and Moderate Income Housing Fund in an amount not to exceed $540,000. This office concurs with HID's request for approval of various actions related to the 27 HID-owned housing assets. I'm here to answer any questions. Thanks.
To make a quick presentation. Hi, good afternoon. I'm Helmi Hesrick, Assistant General Manager at the Housing and Community Investment Department. And I wanted to make a few comments regarding this recommendation of a disposition of these assets. If you'll recall that in June of 2013, the Housing and Community Investment Department absorbed some 60 properties from the redevelopment agency, as well as $600 million in loans and about 23,000 units of housing. We've been absorbing all of that work into the department and doing due diligence on all the properties that we've inherited. What you have before you today is the properties that have not been developed that we are recommending be made available for development, or those properties that are occupied be released from the city's ownership into the hands of qualified property owners. The recommendation the department was faced with a decision in inheriting these properties and coming up with a disposition strategy between identifying specific development plans and releasing them one at a time based on financing availability, or taking a more aggressive approach and making them all available at the same time and letting the developer community come back to us with plans and ideas. And we think making the land available now at one time creates an opportunity for the creativity and financing strategies of the private sector that wouldn't happen if we did it in a more slow, measured process. So for that reason, we're recommending that the vacant properties be released as an RFQ, or request for qualification, which emphasizes the qualification of the team of developers and not a request for proposals, because we haven't prescribed specifically what should be at every site. What we will make available in the RFQ process is information about what the historical record of development that the CRA had on the site, any of the zoning that's on the site, as well as community interests that particularly are reflected in council member perspectives. We do anticipate these projects to be developed at different times and using different financing sources. We are not making recommendations for financing the sites at this time. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
So I've got a couple of questions. Actually, I think this is really, really exciting because it's a big portfolio that we're going to put on the street, and we should have a lot of interest, I think. So in Category 1 of the properties that we're going to RFQ, are we also going to do any additional workup of these parcels? Are we seeing if any of these will fit into the managed pipeline to get some tax credit? I mean, I know you mentioned that we're agnostic right now in the financing, but do any of these lend themselves to any additional sort of leverage so that we can sweeten the pot here with the development community?
Again, that's the whole concept of the RFQ, is to let the developer community come back with a recommendation about what they think best fits in the site. If it's something that requires a 9% tax credit, which is a highly leveraged, highly competitive source, it may take a little longer to develop those, but we think it's certainly possible to make that happen over time. If the property doesn't require 9% tax credits but could leverage, for example, the cap and trade or Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities funds or some other source of outside leverage and not go through the 9% pipeline, it could happen much more quickly and not go through the managed pipeline.
So we're really leaving it to the creativity of the development community at this point. So I think that's good. Is there also, I know that we have to have these developed by 2018, so we're under some constraints here.
We have to have a development plan in place.
Okay.
They don't have to be built.
Okay, very good. So, understanding that, the council, I assume, and I guess this is more of a statement, we will have an opportunity to take a look at those RFQs based on your recommendations and say we favor more permanent supportive housing versus, moderate high affordability. We'll have that flexibility at some point once we know what we get back.
Well, I would say you'll have flexibility both before and after the RFQ. So before we issue the RFQ, we will come back to the council members to make sure that the RFQ for each site is reflective of the vision for the area. Okay. In some cases, there may not be a clear vision, and so one of the things we'll be looking for is to select a developer that's highly qualified in community engagement process. And that would then go through a process of figuring out what makes sense for the site. Sure. It'll vary parcel by parcel.
Okay. And so when that RFQ gets developed, will you be bringing that back to committee for our approval, or this is the approval to
This is the approval to issue the RFQ.
Okay.
We will bring back our recommendations for who's selected to the council, and I would say that entering into an exclusive negotiating agreement, there will be an opportunity during that period as well to engage with the council office.
I ask only because I really have a strong preference these days for more homelessness solution-oriented sort of projects in my district, understanding that we need it all. So we'll see what we get. Is there anybody here from the Economic Workforce Development Department? Doesn't look like there is. I've got a question on how it is that we're going to, and I'm excited about this. I guess it's category. Is it two? Category 2. You've got 3 there in that category, and I'm just wondering, what experience has the Economic Workforce Development Department? They're largely, and this is, I guess, tough for you to answer, they're going to go and give us an idea of what kind of economic development opportunities these properties will bring. Is that right?
Yes. Each of these parcels differs, and in our due diligence on the properties, we identified what was the sort of the redevelopment intent of the property or what had been thought of. Yeah. In the case of the property in Council District 7, for example, that actually is not a CRA site. That site was owned by the department through a REO or a foreclosure. Right. And we have tried to develop it as housing, and it hasn't had any housing proposals had made sense.
I've known it for 15 years.
So we do think that we are relying on economic and workforce development to come up with a process to make that site available, knowing that its proximity to
the Discovery Cube.
Correct, yeah, the Discovery Cube, that there might be a use that's more appropriate for children. So I think we are going to be looking to them for some leadership on how to use that site.
Okay. Well, we're all ears. I wanted to get a sense for their timing, their experience, and having done all of this, but I won't put you in the place of them, but we'll talk to them privately. Okay, very good. I'm very excited about this. This is really good for the city of Los Angeles, potentially, once we get them all up in line. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Senator?
Yeah, still enthusiastic about this roadmap. Curious, are there going to be any incentives to encourage developers to identify one or more sites? I mean, is there some is there value in having some incentives?
Incentives beyond the land?
Yes.
I think that what we will anticipate, we're not putting any incentives into the RFQ, any additional funding. We do expect that folks will be interested in knowing whether or not they can access other funding resources. And as I mentioned before, we're open to the use of other resources, but it will be, it'll affect the timing of development as well as what the rents are and the uses. So I think rather than try to predict at this point what resources are necessary, we'd like to see the developers come back with plans. The land.
For example, they get a bonus if they've identified 2 or 3 different sites that they want to concept on, or is the value of trying to identify more than one?
We haven't identified any bonuses for multiple sites. It could be the case, and for example, I believe there's 2 sites in your district that are located across the street from each other. So it might make sense in that context to give a preference for one entity to develop both sites. And I think we would like to discuss that with the council office before going forward with the RFQ.
So thank you, this is very exciting. I'm playing a little bit of catch up, so some of my questions will be things that you addressed a while ago. So the particular site that's in the 8th Council District is an old library. And the last, I'm looking at something on Manchester.
Uh-huh.
Right, so that's a library that was closed for several years, and then it finally got demolished. And the last set of neighborhood council and community meetings we went to, folks said that the plan was for that to be part of a larger medical complex, because there's a new Kaiser there with like 2 parcels away, and then another medical building 2 parcels to the west. And so this seems to zero in on housing. Is there going to be flexibility at all in the way that this process is laid out?
Sure. The properties are set forth for housing because the land was acquired with set-aside funds, low and moderate income housing set aside from the redevelopment agency. So they're statutorily required to be made available for affordable housing, or that's what they were acquired for. If they are not used for that, and it's certainly possible that we don't use them for affordable housing, the land would have to be purchased at fair market value, and the funds from the proceeds from the sale would go into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. So it could be used, if it's not appropriate for housing, it could be used for non-housing purposes.
You could also swap, right? I mean, I think you should all meet with CEA because you could do a land swap if you have any other properties.
Well, yes.
You all don't like that.
No, I love it. Personally, I'd be more than happy to swap land. The problem is that everything we do on these parcels, we have to get approval from the Department of Finance at the state, and they haven't been particularly interested in flexibility.
We have some people from Sacramento. So.
Great.
We'll talk that through. Okay. Public comment. Public comment, Herman.
He left the room.
Next card.
He has spoken 3 times, so he has 2 minutes left.
All right. Where to go? Recommendations. Sit on public comment. Item 4, right?
Number 4.
Oh, I have his cards for 5. Okay. Let's go. So, I have a recommendation to amend the CAO recommendation 1A and the CAO report to remove 2 properties in CD1 and 2 properties in CD10 from category 1 RFQ list. Take these separately or do them in as a group?
That's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Would certainly be preferable that you identified each of the properties separately.
Okay. So, you want me to repeat that with identifying this property specifically?
That would be.
Okay. So, amend CAO recommendation 1A and the CAO report to remove 2 properties in CD1 listed at the Berendel, 1035, 1039 Berendel Street, and 1047, 1053 Mariposa. 2 properties in CD10 at 2375 West Washington Boulevard and 4314 West Adams. You want to CD8, you want the Manchester? Remove 1636 West Manchester Avenue. Okay. So do we vote on it separately? Do we vote on it now?
Yes.
Okay. Motion.
I move.
Second. Second. Objections? Okay. Next, remove recommendations 1C from CAO report, which refers to an RFP until HCID works with each council district listed in category 4. Yes, sir? To remove a recommendation 1C that deals with the next one, category 4, until HCID works with each CD listed in 4. That would be you, and Herbie. Who's in the 15th? Joe B. Joe B. Joey. Okay. Motion, second.
Second.
Objection. And then finally, report back with RFP in 30 days. Approve the CAO report as amended.
Move.
Objection? Second? So be the order. Item number 4.
That takes us to item number 5, Mr. Chair. Item number...
So we're going to adjourn for a
okay.
special meeting closed session
Want to take public comment first?
on item 5.
Yes, sir.
We need to recess the regular meeting and
Well,
then
public comment first or recess?
public comment for item 5.
Yes.
We can do that when we come back. Unless there are members here that want to do it now. It's really up to you, Mr. Chair.
I do.
Okay. Herman's not here on 5. Karen Caesar here on 5. Coming up.
We're not in closed session until the completion of public comment.
Go ahead.
Karen Caesar, Central San Pedro Neighborhood Council, Chair of the Committee on Homelessness. My concern is I hear all the talk. I'm not just speaking on the one topic, but I don't hear much about CD15. And we've been having a big problem down in San Pedro with the homeless issue. But this topic right here, I'm wondering about 22 housing developments, if Rancho San Pedro is one of them. I know that our councilman has called for a feasibility study on Rancho San Pedro, and that feasibility study is supposed to be finished this month, but we haven't seen it yet. So I'm concerned, as is pretty much all the residents of Rancho San Pedro, what's going to happen to them. Are they going to be put out homeless? We've heard that it's going to be transferred into mixed use because of all the changes that are happening at ports of call. That's a real challenge that we're having. And our communication with our councilman has not been real good lately over this issue, over homelessness.
Thank you. We're going to close session now.
Do you want to...
Antonio Ramirez.
Did she leave?
Left the room.
She left. Yes. Thank you.
That's it.
Yes.
So you want to adjourn, temporarily adjourn the regular, and then convene the special?
Yes.
Okay. Let's adjourn and go into closed session.